Data storytellers, we are finally here. This is an episode that we've been planning literally for 2 years. I think when Anthony joined one of our masterclasses years ago, we immediately agreed that our conversations should be immortalized in the form of a recording. But then after back and forth, I had a kid. I think he had a kid, so we couldn't
Yeah,
make it happen. But
had two of them. Had two
oh
of
yeah, I
them.
had two. You had to. I have two now as well. So I know it's a competition. Both of us have.
Well, you might
Both of us.
you might win. You might win if you're doing it anymore because I think we're done.
We'll see. We'll see. Um, but anyways, Anthony, before we dive in, welcome on the show. It's been long overdue.
Yeah, excited to join you. I know. I feel like we have been talking about it for like 2 years, so it feels good to finally be here.
Yeah, and we just linked back up again like a couple of months ago, maybe even couple of weeks ago, and immediately agreed that that podcast that we never had should be had now. And it's a good time, right? Because I think when you joined, when was that even? It was like
I think it was
2022,
I think it was the end of
2023.
2022, early 2023. It was because I just started
Yeah.
my new role at that point.
Which is crazy because if you think about it, when you and I started talking, ChatGPT wasn't even a thing.
Yeah,
It might have existed,
yeah,
but it hasn't really conquered the public consciousness to the degree that we have now. So now we are living through this enterprise data, not data. You see, enterprise AI revolution. Even though
yeah.
it's ultimately a data revolution if you're privy to what's happening behind the scenes. But it's an exciting time to be a data analytics professional, right? So just from your perspective, before we explore your career, which I know that you have a bunch of stories from companies like Kraft, and now you're with Ferrara. First of all, what is your assessment of the state of data analytics in an enterprise setting today? Like, what keeps you busy? What makes you excited, concerned, hopeful, and a mix
Yeah.
of all those?
No, I mean it's a great question. I do feel like I'm sure everyone says this when asked this question, probably 10 years ago, probably said this is the time to be in data, but I do feel like this is the time where it's so exciting. Like it feels like there's so much opportunity, and I think with that, you said, maybe keeps you up at night. I feel like with that, it's like so also a little bit scary because you got to think like, am I doing enough? Is our team doing enough? Are we investing enough? Knowing that there's so many opportunities that are out there, and it feels like things are changing every day, at least every week, if not every day. Like you said, that when we first were connecting, talking, even though it was 2.5 years ago, ChatGPT was like a thing, but it was like this thing that launched that maybe people that were on the super early stage had adopted and had started to use, but probably even you know 4 and 5 analytics people probably weren't using it day to day. Now I think it's flipped where if you're not in that 4 and 5, you're probably in the minority of people that aren't leveraging some of those new technologies. So I think it's an incredibly exciting time. It's almost overwhelming with that too, because there's just so much opportunity and thinking about what to lean into, what not. Sometimes there's a lot of noise, but what they say, like strategy is actually choosing and picking a lane and figuring out where to spend your time. So it's also a good time too to learn from others, have conversations, and figure out what's the best path to go down when it comes to the data strategy that teams are going on.
I liked how you put it that strategy is about picking a lane. And I think that
Yes.
that's a great way to conceptualize it because, especially today, there are so many opportunities and everyone is selling you their own perspective, and the AI experts on LinkedIn, even as I put it, you might be like falling behind if you're not, doing XY, you're already behind. So the,
Yeah.
the, the FOMO and the noise is just insane. But a good strategy is about carving out a clear path that will elevate your chance of success. So with regards to AI, and we're gonna this episode is not about AI, right? So we have plenty of those, but how do you see that actually now changing the enterprise analytics landscape? I'm more interested in just your take as a professional on the front lines.
Yeah. Yeah, I think again, maybe the simple answer, but I think it's going to make everyone that much more efficient. So you hear the
Mhm.
comments around people becoming 10x programmers when it comes to AI if they're in coding. But I think if you're using the technology that's at a lot of people's disposal. Like you don't have to have, as you probably know, and probably your watchers and listeners know, you don't have to have a login to go on ChatGPT. Like you can get some, or Gemini or whatever form you want to be in. For sure, there's next level subscriptions that you can buy into. That if you do, it's great. But I think the opportunity and how it's going to change the enterprise is to make everyone that much more efficient and help. Man, I really do hope, and maybe this is just me being someone who's a bit more optimistic, is that it drives so much more positive engagement for everyone in the jobs that they're doing, because hopefully it helps teams. This is what we're finding, at least within our teams. It's reducing the amount of what I call non-value added work that is mind numbing. It is
Yeah.
not fun stuff. And it helps free up the time to really focus on the bigger strategic work. I know that there's a ton of articles out there that say job replacement, but I really do think, truthfully, that it's not about job replacement. It's about job reinvention and evolution of
Mm.
what people will do, how they will spend their time, and the fulfillment I think they will get out of their job by not having to do some of the stuff that might have been the tedious, rudimentary stuff, and focus on the more strategic, the thinking, the action planning, the creative stuff that AI can't necessarily do for you, or you shouldn't necessarily trust it to do for
Mm. That's a great point, and I'm with you on that. So the listeners probably know at this stage, it's nowadays you always want to box someone in. Hey, are you like an AI optimist?
you.
Are you concerned about AI? It's already getting tribalized. I guess you need to box people in. I
It
guess
is.
I'm in the AI optimist box as well, but not, I think, like most people, because at the same time I am an AI skeptic, especially when it comes to the grandiose sci-fi dreams of, the super intelligence
Yeah.
taking over and replacing each human being. Not just because I don't want that to be the future, but I think there are many things happening, including how a sleight of hand kind of took place after, the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. While in the 80s, when we said AI, actually what we meant in today's language was AGI. I know that a
Yeah.
lot of people don't even know what AGI is, but
Yeah.
artificial general, like, the like an average layperson, but like artificial general intelligence would be an AI solution that can actually perform at human like levels across multiple domains, can independently learn and make decisions and all that. Now, what we have now with large language models is a universe away from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
What we have is a one-dimensional, incredibly powerful tool that's and I don't want to, brush it off, but it is a glorified guessing machine that is probably the most powerful tool that we invented since, I don't know, like the steam engine, right?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
so the two things can be true at the same time, and I'm seeing that a bunch of our members are also going through these massive organizational transformations where the C-suite is absolutely, obsessed about generating as much value and capturing as much opportunity from this as possible. And a part of it is actually getting rid of workforce, right?
Yeah.
And it is in part of is it is in part about pleasing investors, and investors and stakeholders, shareholders would like to see the actual steps that are being taken so that the company, does not fall behind. I agree with you that even though that happens, it's ultimately job reinvention, because a lot of these companies will rehire a bunch
Yeah.
of people
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
hire new people. So ultimately, what we're seeing is a natural kind of contraction and expansion that fits the bill in terms of how real and huge this AI revolution is, and the market will behave in a certain way inevitably. That's just my take.
Yeah, no, I would say that when you said about putting people in boxes, I feel like I always think about myself as a pragmatic optimist. So it's
Mm,
like there is a reality of what could happen, but I do probably have a bit more of a optimistic spin. But what I would say too, and I think maybe we'll tie into what we might talk about
yeah.
today, is like the role of people that work in the analytics space in these companies, is how can you help be the change agent and be a force that helps upskill others across the organization, whether through your own tools, through your expertise areas. Because again, I think you mentioned it could be hiring from the outside to bring in the people that it might have the skills. But man, there's so many incredibly smart people that work across every company. I know within our own, and it's giving them the tools, the skill set, so that they can up level themselves to be ready for what is to come from this next generation of technology that'll become embedded across every organization. It won't be, reading articles and seeing XYZ company is doing something cool. In 5 or 10 years, it'll be we're all doing that, and it's like almost the baseline. So
It'll be
we'll see how it goes.
fascinating to see how it actually plays out.
Yeah.
It's funny that when you said, "Well, if I'm thinking about a box, if I'm thinking about a box, I'm a pragmatic optimist." I'm just thinking we should create a questionnaire that people can fill out a quiz, and it will give you your AI thought leader archetype.
Hey, who can help us make that? AI. AI can help us make that.
Love it, love it. All right, sir. So after this, I would love to gonna take now a pivot and start exploring that playbook that we've been talking about, because I think you have a lot of valuable perspectives and cool stories and experiences when it comes to uh, turning an organization into a more data-driven enterprise. And before we do that, so I think a good way to start would be just how did you even get into analytics? I'm not sure if I know the answer to that question. You might have
Yeah.
mentioned that, but I would love to explore slash re-explore.
Yeah, no, I'm sure as with everyone, the story's long, but I'll try to keep it short. I mean, I started my career was like pretty much in marketing, and when I went to school, I thought marketing meant that you were a brand manager or you worked in advertising. And um, my first job, I wound up getting it because I told the recruiter I was super fascinated by the world of consumer behavior, like why people make decisions they do. And I was the TA for statistics in my college, and they were like, "Oh man, you'd be great in insights." And at the time, I had no clue what they meant by insights. I was like, "Oh, that sounds like a job, and it sounds like an exciting one." So I took a ride on the job and spent about 8 years in the world of what would be like consumer insights, market research, where um, we did a lot more like ad hoc work, product research, innovation, qualitative work. We did quantitative, but as far as like analytics, it was a portion of the work. It wasn't until I went into consulting for about a year. It was awesome to work across many different clients and sectors, but I really missed being on the client side, helping to really operationalize the insights and learnings and be close to the business, which I think will probably come out in our conversation later. But I had an opportunity to join Ferrara, which you might not know the overall name, but you definitely know the brands. It's Nerds, it's Sweet Tarts, Trolley, Laffy Taffy, all the amazing, candies that are out there. Um, to lead what we called our consumer analytics team at the time, and it was, so I always joke that I feel like I stumbled my way across the career based off of leaning in and taking opportunities as they come. So first stumbled into insights at Heinz, which then became Kraft Heinz, and then stumbled my way into being more in the analytics space. And I've been at the company now for about 3 years. Our team has grown. We've been doing a lot of really great work, and I feel like I always appreciate forums like this or through the data storytellers masterclass, just to really connect with others across the industry, to learn from others and see what they're doing. Because I feel like if all of us are stumbling our way through and finding the opportunity, sometimes it's good to connect with some of the others that might be stumbling across and just learn from each other. So
Especially with new stuff where there's no gospel or established in it. It's not
yeah,
like, supply chain. I mean, supply chain might be a wrong example because it's being absolutely, revolutionized by AI. But let's say 10 years ago, if you looked at something like supply chain, it's been around for 30 years. There are best practices established. It's being taught in universities. But now, to figure out what to do, what's the best action for you forward, well, where can you go? You can get the consultants who also just naturally, I mean, they haven't done it yet
yeah.
because it's so new. So you can just go back to first principles and see what others are up to. Now, it's interesting that you started in insights, because that was my kind of entry point into analytics as well. So
No, no
what
way.
happened is, yeah, so when I left the academy where they were training me to be a reconnaissance officer and military intelligence specifically, that was the data
Yeah,
driven applications of certain military practices. Now, when I started business, it was in London, and I worked for a company that was rolling out programs, executive exchange programs for senior marketers in big companies,
yeah,
Fortune 500 companies coming together to talk about mainly digital transformation that was the hot topic at the time. It was like,
Yeah.
2014 we're talking about, and also customer experience. Those are the two hot topics. And then data driven marketing came in as the next big thing. And I remember the first project, which was a 3-day masterclass in London led by Bill Hoffman, who used to be the SVP of Insights over at Best Buy.
Yeah.
Actually, during the time of the great financial crisis of 2008. And Best Buy, in part because of their application of data driven marketing practices, came out of that financial crisis in a better shape than they went into it. In fact, they were the highest performing retailer in terms of growth during that time because of that. So we rolled out this program for marketers. It was called From Insights to Action, which
Yeah.
was actually designed to help these marketers implement data-driven marketing in their organizations. But no marketer joined. But actually, what ended up happening is that I kind of stumbled into a whole new field of professionals who were heading up business analytics
Yeah.
and actually marketing intelligence specifically. So maybe for that, can you just explain like how you see the distinction? Because these terms kind of flow into each other and
Oh yeah.
intersect, right? Data and BI and insights and all that. So from your perspective, coming into it without even an understanding of this whole business analytics world, like from insights to analytics, right? What was that journey like for you? And how would you describe even the difference to someone who might be a little bit new to the field?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like man, one, I would just say before we jump into it, I feel like if you feel like you're in one camp or the other, get exposure to the other camps because I feel like that just makes you such a well-rounded individual, or find a place where you get to flex both muscles. I feel like even though at Ferrara we have two separate groups of like our we call it our business intelligence and analytics group, which I run, and we have a consumer insights team. We're so closely connected, and like that's I shouldn't do this. I should do this. Like we're so closely connected that like that's the way to operate. So I would say that for anyone listening is to get exposure across each. It'll make you a better marketer, a better thinker. But for me at least, like insights is really I feel like where you're doing the discovery, the early understanding, the research to get to the initial why and what products should we launch. Not that analytics can't get that for you, but I feel like on the insight side, you're doing a lot of primary work in generating your own consumer research on the front end, whether it's through product or advertising or strategy, or figuring out like what's the best consumer segment to go after, or the some of the where to play, how to win work that's become really popular over the past 5 or 10 years. While on the analytics side, of the BI side, I think it's more about taking the data, whether it's in market data, data that's readily available to you either through your own sources or through syndicated sources, and trying to measure, monitor, and understand what is successful, what is not, what are opportunities based off of what you're seeing in the marketplace, and giving a really good sense of how the business is performing or how the marketing is performing or investments are performing across the board. So I feel like there's a point at which it's insights is doing more of the discovery, the recommendations, and driving the strategies that then analytics or people that might be in the business intelligence and analytics side might then do more of the measurement. But I feel like that's where it's so important to have those teams so critically connected, because if you have the full circle of the analytics group really understanding, if it's not then sharing those learnings through, it's kind of like you're missing part of the circle. I feel like, so I don't know. That's how at least I've really understood it always, and I feel like I don't think you have to be necessarily in one group or the other in order to flex some of those muscles. I think it's like so critically important to be able to try to flex those muscles in some way, shape, or form, whether you're in more of an insights role or an analytics role at a company.
And what new skills did you need to develop and adopt to become an analytics professional going from insights? Because that's another conversation. A lot of people come from different disciplines, and then
Yeah.
that requires a different skill set.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. I mean, obviously, when you're in insights, you definitely need to know how to use data. You're telling stories all the time from either research you've run, the hundreds of consumers you've talked to or surveyed. But I feel like on the analytics side, you start to really need to develop your analytics chops in how you can wrap your arms around a massive data set of more unstructured data, make it structured, and then tell a story with it. So I think that's a key one. I think technology and those skills exist in both, but I do think there might be more of a lean towards having the being an early adopter with different technology stacks or different applications that might be out there from an analytics side, just to make just because your tool sets tend to be, I always joke, it's like I feel like we live and die at the computers and our Excel spreadsheets and our Power BI dashboards, while maybe our insights friends are traveling and doing fun research and interviewing and talking to consumers. It's not that we don't, um, but that's where I think maybe the skills differ a little bit. And the skills that I really had to continue to start mastering is also just knowing what are more of the advanced analytics tools and solutions that are out there that I maybe didn't have exposure to before, whether that's doing our team owns and does all the market mix modeling. So all the heavy analysis to figure out what are the returns we're seeing across the marketplace through different spends across social, TV and other places. And not that someone at Insights wouldn't have that, but I think that's where you start to see how different advanced analytics solutions start to show up a bit more if you're in that space. You got to learn about it. So I think regardless of which side you're in, I always say one of the most important skills to have is the curiosity muscle, and like the curiosity to want to learn, lean in, learn about those new tools, but then also not be afraid to reach across different aisles to different teams to learn about what they're doing in their role, so that you could figure out how what you do might shape the work that they're doing.
You almost become like the synthesizer of
Yeah.
different areas of expertise. It's kind of a surprising role for analytics professionals, but this is what we found over the years, that that's a huge segment of value that you can provide to your stakeholders and elevate the value of your team. And speaking of that, so there are different philosophies about this and different takes, but what do you think is at the heart of quote unquote data driven uh, of a data driven organization? What does it mean that a business is data driven or data informed, especially in an industry like yours? And how do you see the role of an analytics team? And this is how we can actually kind of go into your playbook as well. But first, maybe just if we can paint some context.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a term that gets thrown around all the time. So I think like defining it's probably good, at least in our words. But I don't know. I think like if you're truly a data driven organization, I think it's probably a few things. One, you obviously have data information that you have at your fingertips or at the cross functionals fingertips, so that everyone has access to information, not just the analytics team. So probably availability and of data across the org. Also, like the data's good, so like you're making good decisions off of good data too, and not a limited set of it. You're taking different data and bridging it across to tell a story. To your point about synthesizing, I think taking complex sets of what might be different data and telling a story of them together, probably an important factor for any organization to have if they want to be truly data driven. And then I think the data being set up to actually help make decisions, which is probably data driven, but like I think that's like so key, is like you can have so much information and data, but if the teams either aren't trained or you don't have the right type of information to actually then make a decision from it, it's then just numbers in a spreadsheet or a pretty PowerPoint chart that actually doesn't help drive or inspire any action. So I think that's another one. I think maybe on the surface that sounds very like no duh, but I think there's tons of data out there that might just be data's sake, or it's interesting, it helps itch a curiosity, but then you have to kind of separate what is the data that actually helps different stakeholders drive action. And that's where I think it's important to get close with some of the different stakeholders so that you can figure out what kind of data does your demand planning team look for and look at, and what really helps drive action with them. It's not going to be the same as what the brand team might use, and it might not be the same as what your internal creative team might use to help with creating better content, or the finance team. So I think that's where data driven can kind of be used, I think, a lot, but figuring out how you have the right data sets internally, you have the teams that know how to use it, and you have the data fit for purpose across different teams that actually drives action, and helps really, drive the good change we want to see through more data driven decision making.
So you already, I think, mentioned the cultural piece, right? And I'm looking at some of the notes that we're discussing. So it's funny that you put here that the analytics team's role is to close the gap between insights and action. And I mentioned that program that was my first kind of experience with analytics was called From Insights to Action. But that's almost like counterintuitive, that you would think that, oh wow, the role of the analytics team that seems like so far downstream, right, in terms of execution. A lot of people think that, well, it's all about data wrangling and churning out a dashboard and there you go. But actually what you're trying to do is to get people to take the right set of actions, right? And when you have that and it is normalized and consolidated across the business, then you have what we might call a data-driven culture. So, can you talk a little bit about that key point of building analytical acumen to drive a data-driven culture? What kind of role did this play in your career, and how you see the success in this? Like, what are the keys to making this a reality and not just a buzzword?
Yeah, no, I think I think that's like a first step, and the first step of that first step is probably one, the analytics team you have yourself. So, how do you make sure you have people that have the right mindsets and behaviors of being curious, having the lean in to learn, um, you know, having the ambition to want to tackle what could be more ambiguous, meaty problems? Because as you said, the world is very complex, and we tend to tackle and deal with a lot of different, variables or data sets. And being someone who doesn't get overwhelmed by that, but like almost has that itch of like, oh yeah, I want to conquer this chaos. Like that sounds great. So, um, but then make sure that they're upskilled and that they have the right skills first. Just this past year, our team went through a little bit of a boot camp because we were saying, hey, technology is changing all around us. We're getting all these new tools, whether it's Power BI and what's happening now in today's world with AI. How do we make sure we're upskilled ourselves before we become the change agent for the organization? So I'd say that's one of the things, is look internal to your data and analytics team and make sure that you're upskilling them constantly, or at least giving them the avenues to upskill themselves. Um, and then with that, you could try to create the environment where those teams can become change agents for the organizations to also upskill the broader org. So we also did this past year a bit where, it's funny you say insights to action. We have a routine we call analytics to action. And it's all about bringing the teams together to help talk about what's happening on the business, all driven by, some of the foundational reporting and frameworks that our team has made, that's helping to, one, make sure the brand teams know what's going on in their business. I mean, one thing I always talk about, I didn't talk about this in my career journey, but I did a rotation on brand at one point. And while it was only, a year, it wasn't a long stint. What that gave me was so much empathy for what someone deals with when they sit in that seat, because you are the brand manager. Like, you are managing the brand, and that's a very complex role, lots of different stakeholders, managing retailers being mad at you. So, like, there's so much complexity that I appreciate so much by that team. And I always say that because I think it gave me so much empathy as someone who helps support and enable people that sit in that seat. So I always drive that with my team. Is our part of our team's job is to help enable them to make better decisions and make sure that they aren't spending time doing, you know, pulling data. Like, it's not the ABM or the analyst job is not to pull data. It's to understand the data, be able to look at it, help drive actions from the data. And that's exactly what this routine is all about. Going back to the point, this analytics to action routine, even though it's, you know, the frameworks, the reporting, the foundations were all built by our team. It's a form where the brand team then takes that and is empowered to review it, understand the who, what, why, where, when of what's happening, and then come to the table to have action planning and actually talk with the leadership team about what we're doing on the business given what we see. So I think that's part of it. It's one, the upskilling, but it's creating the right rituals and routines to ensure we're always having some of those practices. I think actually one of the things, I know it was a couple years ago, but one of the things I had taken as a learning from the data storytellers class was one of my classmates said that they started an office hours, and it's very casual,
Mm.
once a week. It's seen as an opportunity that it's on everyone's calendar. Join if you can. We'll talk about cool concepts if people join, or bring your problems and we'll tackle them together in the space. And I started doing that post the masterclass. And I would say there's weeks where no one joins, which is fine. Everyone's busy. But when people do and they have questions, it's a safe space for them to just come talk. We work through problems together, and it creates that culture to know that, one, not everyone's going to have the answer. You're going to have people that can help work through it. And if we can't work through it together, we'll figure it out. And I think that's the kind of mindset and behavior and culture I feel like I love driving within our teams.
Yeah, and that's funny. The office hours, those are one of the takeaways that people keep mentioning after such a simple idea,
Yeah, it's so
right?
simple.
But
It's so simple. And it's like, even it's just an hour on the calendar, and then even if no one joins, I then have the hour that I hold for myself to tackle stuff.
exactly.
But otherwise, it's I don't know. I think it also helps show on the flip side for the teams that we are not only available, but we're proactively making our teams available to be business stakeholders and a part of the business, not just there like when you have a problem, and more of a reactive partner.
And this actually ties into that whole idea of building relationships and actually understanding your business partners and business stakeholders, not just doing analytics and being, great at that and elevating that to the level of craftsmanship, which is fantastic, right? But really connecting that to certain outcomes, and that requires an in-depth understanding of that particular area. So how did you find the importance of that, like getting closer to business partners and really understanding their needs? And I imagine that even your experience coming from insights specifically helped you with that.
Yeah, it's funny. I think I feel like I hear it all the time. Like, whether you're in the world of insights or in analytics, I at least hear a lot of people talk about wanting to have a seat at the table. Like, we want our team to have a seat at the table. I think, like, man, it's so important that we don't just want that seat at the table, but we show why we should have it. Like, we connect with the teams to show the value that we bring, and that means some proactiveness from us. Like, all of us in the world of insights or analytics. And I think one of the first steps in doing that is to spend time, even if it's a 30-minute connect, where you say, "Hey, I want to sit down and just understand what you do." So if you're listening and you're in the insights or analytics space, I would say next week or the week after, reach out to someone you know that works in demand planning or finance. Don't Okay, whoever your closest department is, like marketing, sure, you can meet with them, but I'm sure you meet with them all the time. Find teams that are more tangential to marketing, and sit down, understand what it is that they do, how do they make decisions, what information is most helpful for them to make decisions, and take that back. And it's not like you're going to sit in that meeting and try to come up with all these ideas. Learn. And I would say, like, listening, learning, and having that skill set to synthesize, digest, and understand what that could mean for you and your team, um, is the first step of getting closer to your business partners, because it's showing the empathy and the time and the care to want to actually sit down, meet different stakeholders, and then just talk to them and say, understand what they do. But then at some point you could say, well, how can my team help? And then I would say, as someone who's done that, make sure you have the follow up and follow through to actually then deliver on how you can maybe help. And then it just goes such a long way. It's small incremental opportunities, but I think over the past few years, our team has made strides in not just being seen as the team that supports marketing, which I think historically that might have been the mindset, but how do we help be great partners to our sales teams? How do we help, be partners to demand planning or finance, and show that, whether it's through the data sets that our team might own or have the closest view to, is how we can help show the way that we can partner with some of those teams, even if it's not a usual or typical relationship. And I think too, the last thing I would say is, don't be afraid to, once you find some of those stakeholders that you might be close to, ask to be invited to maybe like a meeting that you wouldn't otherwise be in. And whether it's a business process planning meeting or a demand meeting, by joining, and again, listen and learn. Don't like raise your hand and start piping in, but just listening and learning, and you'll walk away saying, "Oh, like, that was so interesting. one, you probably learned about the business in a new way, but then also you can start to figure out how the data and the work that you do can fit in, and you can drive value. And maybe that the third time or the fourth time you show up to that meeting, maybe you can come to the table with something based off of what you know they're talking about. Or you can raise your hand and say, hey, I'm hearing you all talk about this. Like, I think I can actually help with that. And then those small incremental ways that you drive that connection then helps you, one, get that seat at the table, but helps you get a lot closer with the business partners to understand what they're doing on the day to day and prove how your team can help drive value with them.
And I think I loved how you framed this whole, contribution and the nature of the relationship and the value that you can really equip a team with, rather than, hey, we're gonna do analytic stuff for you. We
Yeah.
can do dashboards and reports. It's more like, no, I can actually give you this unique strategic advantage, like data as a strategic weapon. Right. So
Yeah.
can you tell me a little bit more about that framing? Because I think it's a powerful concept.
Yeah. No, I agree. And you said you talked about like just giving them a dashboard. I think dashboards are amazing. It's so great to take data, put it all into a place where anyone can access it. Um, focus on the right KPIs. There's so much value to dashboards, but as everyone always says, like death by 1,000 dashboards. I always think that there's a reality to that. A dashboard can only get you so far. Like it tells you a lot of the what. It doesn't always tell you the why, or it sometimes takes a lot more investigative digging to get to the why or the deeper analysis. So I feel like dashboards are incredible. They're great, but how do you help figure out the right kinds of reporting or ongoing analytics that needs to happen, whether it's every month or every week, depending on the cadence of the information flow at your company, to get to the deeper why that then drives the stronger and deeper action. Because I think again, dashboards can get you there, but I think by the steps we've talked about, the having the culture that is data driven, having the teams that are deeply connected to the business, and then figuring out how to actually shape the right kinds of, I don't want to just say dashboards, but the right kinds of solutions and analytics toolkits that help drive the best action is, I think, where the analytics teams can really set themselves apart and be seen as a strategic partner to the business, and not just one that creates dashboards and does like some of the pretty one pagers that some of the teams like. And I do think it's understanding and getting to the why and how the decisions are being made, and then trying to focus some of the analysis on that. And sometimes the dashboard will maybe do that for you, but other times you got to probably think about the next step you need to take. Because I'll also, again, put yourself in the shoes of your end stakeholder. They probably love having all the dashboards at their fingertips, but sometimes they also need someone to be that consultative partner and not just be the team that helps generate the dashboard every month.
And the consultative partnership, that's super important. And we always talked about, I think we might remember from even the masterclass, the data consigliere, the
Yeah.
whole idea of the trusted advisor.
Yeah.
So it's super important. On the flip side of that, right, we also have the um, when you think about making your business partners' lives easier, a lot of it is about making everything more efficient and smoother and more streamlined, and automation as well. That I think today when people hear automation, we're immediately like, hey, like job loss, right? But at the same time, that's only like a hypothetical of, okay, that it might be that we automate some processes and then there's a job reinvention as a consequence. But most automation does exactly the opposite. It just makes someone's life easier and their value way higher, that they can actually contribute to the business, because you free them up from something mundane that no one wants to do and it's actually not that valuable. Right. So can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about that, the whole aspect of automation and self-service, and the role of those in analytics today, you think?
Yeah, no, I think anyone working in analytics probably already knows this, but for anyone that doesn't, there's sometimes a conundrum of, you have a task, it's maybe a daily task, a weekly, monthly, and it takes you 5 minutes or 10 minutes each month. And the reality is, you could probably spend a few hours one day or several hours one day, or maybe it's a whole day, figuring out how to automate that one task that you do all the time. And on the surface, you're like, but it only takes me like, 15, 20 minutes each time. It's not a big deal. But then you add up the amount of time that is over a year or over a few years, and that's a lot of time. So I think it's one, the value of automating is definitely not, I agree, not replacing or getting rid of people so that the tasks no longer exist. It's freeing up the space so that you can do other stuff that's way more meaningful, way more strategic, that goes beyond just updating data sets or taking data from this system and copying it over to this system so that you can make it all flow together. Like that's the kind of automation that I think we need to continue to focus on. I think there's been some automation happening where it's automation of insights. So you get a lot of data and maybe you can teach and train the AI to help, generate some of your story or your headlines. I think that's interesting. I think sometimes I've seen the machine maybe hallucinate a little bit and pull out stuff that others wouldn't, and be like, well, it says 100%, so that must be the most important thing. But it's like going from, minus 100, it's like going from 1 to 0. It's like, well, that's not the most important thing, because there's items that sell a lot more than one pound of product. Um, but anyways, back to the point, I think the whole leveraging technology to simplify and automate is so important. We've have an example of that within our team, where recently our team that does all the, media understanding and modeling, they've started to spend some time trying to automate how all that data comes through. And because they've done that, they're spending way more time sitting down with the business partners to talk through the learnings and the actions. And they're spending way more mental bandwidth thinking about the whys behind the what versus trying to pull all the data together to just get to the what. And I think that's where the value is going to be way more driven, by spending time doing that kind of stuff. That's the hard thinking, than trying to wrangle a bunch of data sets. So automation, incredibly important. I think it'll continue to be. I think let's maybe as an industry focus on where we want to automate and make the systems ride themselves, versus where we still want to probably have some people that are thinking through the insights and the actions, and continuing to eliminate the non-value added work. I think is like the most important thing, both for, the value that we can add as an organization or as a discipline, but then also the people that work in our discipline, to continue to give them the opportunities to be creative and do more of the strategic work versus some of that redundant work that we all might be very familiar with.
And so first of all, I think this was like a super well-rounded kind of panorama of the whole analytics and insights profession. So I really enjoyed it before, because I know that we are coming close to our time already, which is insane. Like
I
I feel
know,
like
feels quick.
it feels like we barely started, but I don't want to leave without some stories and examples that you have about this, right? So I had this question here. So, what kind of example? Do you have a cool example from consumer products where, let's say, analytics simplified something for your business partners, or empowered a stronger decision, or maybe even some automation examples that you think would kind of just bring some of this to life?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think like one of the best examples we have is just how we've tried to structure all of the reporting and frameworks so that the teams, like we just like any other, CPG or consumer goods company, we get updated data all the time about how our products are selling. And some of the most important, time during the month that's spent is understanding how it's selling, why it's selling, where is it selling well. And historically, there was a lot of custom reporting being done every month. Different teams might have been looking at different views of the data to come up with their own different conclusions. And they're all great. Like teams are doing a great job. But I think one example that maybe ties it all together is we brought in the teams that had some of that data muscle, that curiosity to lean in. Um, we met with the business teams to understand the kinds of decisions they were making, or how they were looking at the business every month. What were the most important questions they were asking themselves, and how are they then taking those questions they asked themselves to develop action plans? And then from there, that's when maybe the follow through came. Is our team developed what we were calling some of our impact reporting, where it was getting to the why, it was getting to the where, it was helping the teams distill the data into more of the answer type of questions, versus being a master data set that they were trying to pivot and sort and make answers out of it, helped get to the answer versus, leading them to spend a ton of time analyzing and pulling data. And then we took that and empower the team with it. Like we talked about making strategic weapons. I think getting it in the hands of the teams and upskilling them so that they know how to use it, and constantly iterating on that, and not treating it as like a thing that we never touch again. But we've iterated it. We've made different versions of this based on over time of either people's ideas or new ways that we've looked at the data. And I think too, the final thing maybe to tie it all together is, as far as automating it, we built it for purpose to make sure that it wasn't something that we were having to go in and touch and update every time. But we've really tried to focus. We tried to focus all around how do we make it so that it is readily available when the data is refreshed, and the teams aren't then spending time pressing the buttons, even if it's a 2-minute thing to export and pull the data down. It's all living somewhere where the teams can leverage it and not spend time doing the things that we've talked about, that is the non-value add time, so that even the brand teams can spend the time doing the right kind of thinking versus the wrong kind of thinking.
Well, this whole user-centered design, actually, it's one of the hottest topics in the community. So even with some of our kind of dedicated in-house workshops that we, sometimes bring to the Fortune 500 teams that we work with, is user-centered design. And it's so important, even if you think about, let's say, the Apple ecosystem, or why the iPhone became what it became. It was in part because all of those small inefficiencies were cut down to the minimum. I think Steve Jobs had this philosophy that you should be able to go from anywhere in the operating system to any other part of the operating system through 2 or 3 clicks.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. Which is a simple concept. It's harder to actually achieve, but when you do, you have almost this irresistible user experience that just pulls you in. So having that kind of mindset, because pulling the data and downloading and uploading, for you it might be second nature, and you can see the matrix, but your business partners don't really care about that
You're
thing.
so right. You're so
Yeah,
right. And
yeah.
I think they might not care about it. And like, I think by making it so easy, even if it's not their expertise area, you can start to see people, and I see it among some of the team members. You see those that have that spark and that curiosity, like, oh, like this is interesting. Like I never looked at it this way, and it's like, yes, like we love that. Like we love to see it, and it only becomes that way by taking a moment to sit in their seat and understanding that even though we all might be data nerds and lovers of analysis, like there's others that have other parts of their job they need to focus on, and how do we just make it easy for them to have that same ownership of the data and be able to take it to make the right kinds of decisions versus just being data providers. I think we were talking about it before. It's like going from being data providers to being decision enablers. And I think that's what analytics teams need to continue to really focus on.
Absolutely. I think this is also a good note to finish on, and we're landing the plane like right on the line. We had this time scheduled out, and look, I really enjoyed the conversation. I think we covered a lot. Whenever you and I speak, I think we can explore all kinds of things as we do, but I think we did a good job of staying on topic. I enjoyed talking about in the beginning a little bit about AI, but also we could take that deep dive that we wanted into the analytics practice and your secret sauce for success. Maybe as a parting comment, like what would you leave the audience with? Maybe a key takeaway, maybe a thought, maybe a quote, whatever you think
Oh man,
will tie a nice knot on the on the conversation.
yeah, yeah. It's okay, man. I should have prepared. I don't have a quote, but maybe I'll just say, for anyone like listening and in the space of analytics or insights, is I think sometimes our teams in an organization get thought of as a support function, or like a group that just does reporting for an organization. But I think anyone who wants to show the value, drive the true relationship, is like, let's all stop thinking about ourselves as support functions or a reporting team, and be more of an enablement function that helps you
Mm.
be a true business partner that not only deserves a seat at the table, but like it's a seat that everyone wants to make sure is in the room, because they're a partner that doesn't just like help provide data, but provides the insights, helps make everyone smarter, grounded in the data, and then enables the better decision making. So that's maybe the last thing I would leave with.
No, I love that. I love that. And reframing is important. And even, semantics are not just semantics. That
Yes.
goes deeper. So that was fantastic. Appreciate your insights, sir. Always enjoy the conversation. And then, hopefully this wasn't the last time either. And I hope to see you back on the show in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks for having me.